All right. So our Mass Now is a multi-issue, multi-strategy feminist organization that was started over 50 years ago in 1966. We are a state chapter of the National Organization for Women that was started by Betty Friedan. Maybe you've been seeing now in the Mrs. America show on Hulu. As a state chapter, we focus on statewide legislation through the Mass Now Inc. So the Inc. lobbies the State House to pass bills on the state level. And we're going to go through our state feminist agenda in this workshop. But because we know that achieving a feminist future doesn't just happen through policy alone, we have 3 different branches of Mass Now in order to have a multi-strategy agenda towards getting this feminist democracy that we're working towards. So the Mass Now Foundation was started 20 years ago to convene our feminist community and educate our members on feminist issues. So you'll see a lot of our programming is specifically about trying to teach our members around statistics and data that comes out around our priority issue areas, connect them to laws that are that we can then lobby our legislators to pass on the state level. And I'll tell you right now that you don't actually need to know any statistics or research in order to be a feminist lobbyist yourself. Our goal as a Mass Now Foundation is also to empower our community through strengthening our personal narratives so that you know that your truth, your story, your lived experience is actually all you need to lobby your legislator. So we're really trying to move our members and our event participants towards action, towards lobbying their state rep and their state senator, because that's how we get bills passed on the state level, and then also to engage their community, hence our question in our introduction around who is your community. That's who we're going to be asking you to bring into this fight. And the Mass Now PAC endorses feminist candidates for office. So we have a questionnaire that our PAC designs on feminist issues, our multi-issue feminist agenda. And then it gets to interview candidates on the state and local level to choose endorsements. And then after we make those endorsements, we are rallying our volunteers to help get these candidates elected, because we know that you can have the best policy drafted in the world, but if you don't have feminists in the legislature, we can't get that legislation passed. So we are 3 different branches, all within the Mass Now family. We do our programming through a number of different ways, and this has to change as our world changes, both because of technology, also because of the pandemic, also because of our ongoing inclusion work. But I wanted to give you all a snapshot on some of the different programming that we have. So we talked about the PAC. We also have ongoing social media campaigns for our legislation so that we hope people will share their story on social media. We have testimony toolkits that we've been drafting in our new member portal that I'm excited to show you so that you can submit your own testimony to the legislature to pass a bill. But we'll give you the template so that you can just fill in your story. We've had different pop-up events over the years, from pop-up art shows around period art, and we also, I don't know, we do lots of fun different events. Consciousness Raisings is a series that we started 2 years ago, and we'll be getting more into those later. Our Feminist in Action grant is a $3,000 grant through our foundation for a young feminist, 30 years or younger, to take a seed idea that they have and turn it into reality based on one of our priority issue areas. Our current winner is Print Ain't Dead, which is an awesome Black feminist pop-up bookstore. And you can hear about them on one of our Feminist Friday episodes, which is one of those pop-up events that we started in March when the quarantine started. Just an hour of Facebook Live feminist content on Fridays at 4 p.m. But you can also find it on our YouTube channel. Another pop-up event that we started recently since the pandemic is a webinar series to bring NOW members together from around the country, because this is the first time that a lot of our sister chapters across the country have been forced to use platforms like Zoom, but it's also been really great to be able to meet members across the country, and really through meeting each other for the first time in maybe decades, the power of organizing amongst the state presidents is very exciting. So we're doing lots of different things. Also, I'm going to keep going, but I do want you to stop and interrupt me anytime with questions. You can put them in the chat box. Feel free. So, Mass Now's feminist agenda. We talk about everything, it seems like, before the pandemic and since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we had a tight 6-issue legislative agenda, with period poverty at the top of this agenda, because it was the bill that Mass Now helped write and found the coalition for. And this bill is called the I AM bill. Kim mentioned it earlier. I AM is an acronym to increase access to menstrual products. And if passed, it would be the most comprehensive menstrual equity legislation statewide in the country. New York City passed this in 2016. And so New York City is like the same size as Massachusetts in terms of these populations. So we know it's possible. And we founded the Massachusetts Menstrual Equity Coalition in March, which now has 40 organizations endorsing and 150 activists. And so this is our pride and joy of statewide policy this legislative session. And it's also worth noting that this is the first legislative session in Massachusetts history where periods have been on the legislative agenda at all for anyone. Like Massachusetts, the legislature has never talked about periods before. So we know that a huge part of this advocacy includes education too, which is why you'll see us doing lots of educations or programming like tomorrow's consciousness raising on period poverty, so that we can learn that we have period poverty stories, perhaps, if that's a new name, it's a new idea, and then continue to think about just the infinite intersections of this issue, right? I have to move my screen a little bit. Oh, but since the pandemic, that's not our number one issue squarely anymore, because there's a new set of emergency legislation that's been thankfully introduced mostly through the Massachusetts Public Health Association. They've created an equity task force. And so we are a part of that task force and have been supporting that coalition effort to, one, end foreclosures and evictions during the pandemic. And thankfully that one has already passed. And what we're now focused on is emergency paid leave time and decarceration, which have not moved in the last week. So there's examples for all of these bills. I'm going to show you where you can find more information around all of these bills that I'm talking about and download the testimony toolkit. But this is just an overview of our priorities. Childcare is the other really big issue that we're prioritizing more and more. When we surveyed our members in 2016, it was the number one issue that our members cared about. And I will admit, it was also an issue that we didn't actually have any legislation that we were working on. And that's because childcare is huge. It's an entire informal system that has not been publicly funded by the state or the federal level writ large. And so there's going to be a lot of work to do in order to create a new system. And so we have 3 bills that we're working on right now for childcare on the state level, but Mass Now is also focusing its strategy on how we can collaborate with our chapters across the country towards doing advocacy on the federal level, because the state won't be able to fund it on its own. The state can't make money like the federal government can yet. So it's a 2-pronged approach for all of these bills, really. So one of the bills that we're working on for childcare is to allow PACs. Mass Now has a PAC. Candidates each have a PAC. It's a political action committee, to allow them to use those funds to allow candidate to use those funds for childcare. Right now, you can use those funds for a tuxedo. You can use them for food, but you can't use them for childcare because because legislators think parents are going to abuse it. And if you look at our and of course they think that because we don't have that many working parents in our state house right now. We have maybe less than 10, I think, in our entire state legislature that are either single parents or the primary caregiver for their child. And so if we want to pass even more childcare legislation, we need to make it possible to elect more working parents to office. I'm going to go out of order and say the Fair Scheduling Act next, because that is a bill that we're working on in conjunction with lots of labor organizations, so that if you're like retail and food service, if you're given your schedule with only a week's notice or a couple of days notice, or your schedule is changing all the time, it's even harder to then find childcare. So this is also based on a bill that has passed in New York, and it would make employers set schedules 2 weeks in advance. And if they're going to change it, then they have to pay time and a half. So that's the fair scheduling bill. And then the big one is the Affordable and Accessible Childcare Bill, which is actually only last week, we changed our name to the Common Start Coalition. And you can think of this as the Universal Childcare Bill. This is asking the state to invest in a solution to find options, flexible, affordable childcare options for every parent, 0 through 5. Right now, there's pre-K, not universally across the Commonwealth, but otherwise students are just guaranteed education starting in kindergarten, and we need to be able to fill this gap 0 through 5. So these are our priorities that I want to tell you about right now, but I'm also just going to talk a little bit about how we think about our priorities in general. So National Now has 6 priority issue areas: reproductive justice, gender-based violence, LGBTQIA rights, racial justice, economic justice, civic and constitutional equity. These are decided upon at the National Now Conference every summer, and then it's up to states to use this lens, this intersectional lens, to choose issues on the state level to then endorse. And so we have probably a dozen other bills that we are working on with that lens that you can read more about in our member portal. Any questions about policy before I get into our volunteer opportunities? I'll talk more about policy, but I just wanted to pause for a second. Okay. So we have 3 volunteer opportunities right now for you to take action. One is to become a consciousness raising host. Consciousness raisings are small group discussions where we talk about our personal experiences with this issue, like period poverty. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about our periods. We're going to talk about getting our periods for the first time, about not knowing what they were, and about not being able to afford them, and also what we can do to take action right now. So they're educational opportunities too. And we were doing these in living rooms across the Commonwealth, which was really fun. And that's literally how Now was started too, in these living room conversations. But now we're coming to your living room, which is not a bad thing, because in a way we can bring together more people from around the state than we've been able to do before. But it means that the role of a consciousness raising host is a little bit different. So a consciousness raising host is an ambassador of this work. We want you to invite your friends and your community to come into conversation with us. And we're hoping to train a cadre of hosts that will be able to facilitate these conversations in breakout groups, so that Mass Now has committed to doing online programming only for the rest of the year, given the pandemic. And so the new structure of consciousness raisings is that a board member will begin with our 10-15-minute overview of the bill and the issue. And then we're going to break out into smaller groups of 10 or so people with a board member and consciousness raising host paired to have smaller, intimate conversations. And one thing we did at our last consciousness raising 2 weeks ago about the childcare bailout was that we ended with with calling our federal senators all together. We put the script on the screen, we muted ourselves, we called while staring at each other, and it was fun. Because there's lots of ways to be a feminist lobbyist, and we need to practice doing them together because we know that they are inaccessible. So we have built a consciousness raising toolkit, which I'll get to in a minute. But the good thing is that we're not looking for we're not going to create a new event for each host. We can have these all together every 2 weeks or so, and then just invite everyone to that one. So 2 weeks ago, it was on childcare. Tomorrow, it's on periods. In 2 weeks, we might talk about police brutality as a feminist issue. If I had to guess right off the top of my head now, but we can keep it a little bit flexible so that it can be around a current event that we all need to talk about. And we have our ongoing feminist agenda, which are conversations for consciousness raisings too. The Massachusetts Menstrual Equity Coalition has really grown into a life of its own, which is exciting. So most coalitions are attended by organizational liaisons who get to do this as their full-time job. And we are creating a coalition. We have created a coalition that is for anyone to come and be a part and be an activist and take a leadership role in it. And I'm really proud and excited of all of the, especially young people from around the state who have taken this work and gone and run with it. You can sign up for the coalition on our website under massnow.org/IAM. We have our next coalition meeting this Wednesday. And once you're a part of that coalition, you'll get all of our emails, and we'll be sending out action alerts as they come. Currently with the IAM bill, I'll say that all legislation is kind of paused in the State House indefinitely. And so we are reworking our strategy to also look at federal legislation. And then the Mass NOW PAC. The Mass NOW PAC meets every 2 weeks. I believe its next week meeting is going to be this Thursday. and they are currently have finalized the questionnaire for the federal campaigns and is about to finalize the questionnaire for the state level campaigns. And so the interview this summer, the PAC will be interviewing candidates, which is the most fun part, really. All right. Any questions before I move on to the Mass Now member portal? Cool. So this is new. We have created a website. I'm going to show you right now on our website. So you're going to go to massnow.org, and I think I made a button for it here. So here's the membership button where everyone should go and become a member now at a sliding scale cost to sustain our work. And then right here is a new button for our member portal, which is an online drive that we've created to share these organizing documents with you. So the password is now 2020 exclamation point. And then you enter our member portal. And here it is. So we have these are the folders. They're also on this slide right here. If you're interested, like I know Kim is, in starting a chapter in your local area, there's a folder for that. National Now has also put together some social media toolkits about the legislation that they are working on the federal level. Our membership committee, we are hoping to get off the ground soon, and this would call Mass Now members to check in, starting with our longtime Mass Now members, which is kind of fun. This is the priority issues where we have all of the bills that we've endorsed and all of our research on them and all the testimonies in that folder, the Mass Now Priorities Issues folder. And then in the Consciousness Raising Toolkit is where you're going to find this beautiful 28-page document that me and the board and a few of our interns have been working on. So this was originally created to help you host a consciousness raising in your home or in your community, which we're not doing, but you should still see those instructions for when we are able to do that. It also goes through our legislative agenda, like I've been talking about, and it this is where we're hoping will make it easier for people to lead their own conversations. So it includes a description of the issue, some of the legislation that we are working on, and some of the partner organizations that we're working with, and then discussion questions to talk about. So pretty much for every single issue, your role as a feminist lobbyist is to call your state rep and your state senator and tell them to support this bill. Even if they're already in support, they need to hear that their constituents are thinking about it. Because if they don't hear from you, they're not going to feel a sense of urgency. And all legislators, especially a lot in Massachusetts, will support many issues, but it's not going to get passed if there isn't a sense of urgency around it, if they're not hearing from us. So that is the action item. So we can call together, but then also submitting testimony is a formal way of lobbying as well as a constituent, which is why we have in our drive, here is an example on the left side of all of the different issues that we are working on. And on the right side is an example of what's in that folder. So you'll see a testimony template, you'll see a fact sheet, and then other resources. So this is for all of your feminist policy nerdy needs. And there's a lot in there. So start with one issue. Just one issue, if you're inspired. I put this little ladder graphic together to give you a vision of how attending this event and attending a consciousness raising builds up towards our leadership pipeline and being a part of our movement. So ideally, after we are moving forward, we're now sending evaluations back from all of our events. So if you attend a consciousness raising, if you attend this event, if you attend our Now webinar on Thursday, we're going to ask you if you want to follow up with a Mass Now board member, another person besides me. And they'll be able to talk to you more about what you're interested in and what we're doing. So it's a little bit more personal and less scary than this group setting. And then we're hoping that you will join a committee, whether it's becoming a consciousness raising host, our membership committee, or the PAC, and commit to attending those regularly. We then hope that perhaps in a year or so, we will be able to transition the leadership of those committees from board members to other members once that work is a little bit more routine. And then we have our annual elections for our board every December at our state conference. And at the same time, we hope all of you, if you haven't already, are liking Mass Now on social media, follow us at Mass Now, become a member, and invite your friend to come to our events with you. And that's it. That is our overview. I can talk more about any of these issues if someone has a question on what is the bill, where is the bill now, but I didn't want to just run through them all. First two.